There was a lot of speculation about why Paul Castellano was rubbed out. One theory was that he was too busy with his trial to run the Gambino crime family and that the trial would cause him too much publicity. Well, that may be something John Gotti's thinking about these days. The word is that he is now the boss of the Gambino family, and he's also on trial, along with about a half dozen others. It's going to be interesting because it's going to take a lot of his time and cause a lot of publicity. Pablo Guzman reports.
The indictment charges, among others, Agnello Della Croce as the underboss of the Gambino crime family and identifies two specific crews headed by Capo John Gotti and Nicholas Carozzo.
That was U.S. Attorney Raymond Deary speaking after the arraignment last March of alleged Gambino underboss Agnello Della Croce and 9 other defendants on racketeering charges. But a lot has changed in 10 months. Della Croce died of natural causes. His son Armand pleaded guilty the week his father died. 1 defendant is a fugitive. And of the remaining 7, police officials say John Gotti has replaced the late Paul Castellano as the new head of the Gambino family. Developments which added a prophetic ring to U.S. Attorney Deary's remarks last year.
It is clear that today's capos and lieutenants are tomorrow's leaders and bosses.
Barry Slotnick was the late Della Croce's attorney. He had this to say about a New York Times report yesterday which named Gotti as the new head of organized crime.
Someone said that the FBI got together and made an election, so I guess the New York Times reported the results of their election.
Gotti's attorney said he would file a motion for dismissal based on prejudicial publicity.
Just on the question of the motions regarding the publicity, those motions haven't worked in Manhattan. Why do you think they'll work here in Brooklyn?
Well, I think depending on which court you're before, you can win one place and lose another place. I'm optimistic that this court will grant the motion.
One of the reasons why it took time to fix a trial date was because so many of the lawyers here are involved in other organized crime cases in Manhattan. In fact, one of the lawyers here is a defendant in one of those cases. But finally, April 7th was fixed as a trial date. From the courts in Brooklyn, I'm Pablo Guzman, Channel 5 News.
John Gotti turned in his leather loafers for sneakers and his custom suits for prison uniform today. The man they call a godfather is in jail. His bail pulled out from under him. And it's not protective custody, not for him anyway. The government figures that witnesses against him would be better off. His trial on racketeering charges starts this summer. Ron Claiborne reports.
Just before noon, John Gotti had apparently given up hope of staying out of jail and headed for the U.S. Marshal's office at Brooklyn Federal Court to surrender. But then his lawyers reached him with the news that he could remain free for at least another 3 hours, while 3 circuit court judges considered his appeal. Earlier, Gotti's lawyer, Bruce Cutler, had argued before the judges that there was no legal reason to jail Gotti, as ordered by Eugene Nickerson, the judge in his federal racketeering trial. Federal prosecutors had said, and Nickerson agreed, that Gotti's $1 million bail should be revoked because he's likely to intimidate witnesses in his racketeering case and because he is still allegedly running the Gambino family. To back up their argument, they said that Gotti had already scared Romuald Pichek into withdrawing charges that Gotti and an associate beat him up on a Queen Street over a traffic dispute. At today's hearing, Gotti's lawyer submitted a lie detector test of Pichek to try and prove that he is telling the truth when he says that Gotti did not beat him. But in the end, the judges ruled that Gotti must go to jail, at least until they hear his appeal of Judge Nickerson's ruling. So at 3 o'clock this afternoon, John Gotti gave himself up.
Mr. Gotti will be photographed and fingerprinted. He will then be placed in the detention cell with the other prisoners, and he'll await transportation over to our Metropolitan Correctional Center.
This evening, Gotti arrived at the federal prison in Lower Manhattan, shackled by leg irons, his arms bound by handcuffs.
I don't know if I didn't expect it. I was optimistic we'd get a stay. We did not get a stay, so we surrendered.
Okay, now what does this mean now? You have an appeal next week?
We file a brief on Friday, appealing Judge Nickerson's remand order, and hopefully we'll win that appeal. If not, we'll just prepare for trial from the MCC.
Now, today's decision does not mean that John Gotti must go to jail until his racketeering trial begins in August. It merely means that he must be in jail until the circuit court hears his appeal of Judge Nickerson's ruling, which should be sometime next week. Ron Claiborne, Channel 5 News.
Good morning. Good morning. How's everybody doing? Okay. Smiley, happy, ready to go to work. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, Russ.
Just film.
That's too loud. Bring the Toco down. Bring it down. Good. Bring it up a little bit. Toco up. Bring the Toco up. Okay.
Don't pull it, don't pull it.
Okay, bring it down. Bring it down.
Do a little audio? Jump. Let's get out of here.
Oh, now bring it back. Yeah. Okay. Good.
Now that John Gotti is in jail, Angelo Ruggiero is the man who's supposed to be running the Gambino crime family day to day. Well, today a federal judge ordered Ruggiero to join his boss in the slammer. Frank Grimes reports.
Angelo Ruggiero, arrested last Friday on federal racketeering charges. He had been out on $1 million bail on a 1983 drug charge. All week, federal prosecutors have been trying to revoke that bail so they can keep him off the street. They say the new indictment proves Ruggiero committed crimes while out on bail, including involvement in the murder last December 16th of Gambino crime boss Paul Castellano and his henchman Thomas Bellotti. So far, 2 federal judges have denied the government's move to revoke Ruggiero's bail, but kept him in jail until the feds could appeal to an appellate magistrate. Federal prosecutors did that this afternoon in front of Judge Mark Constantino. He originally set bail in Ruggiero's '83 drug case. The judge said he wanted to hear new evidence, not the same allegations the other judges heard. Federal prosecutor Robert LaRusso put FBI agent William Hansen on the stand. He read from transcripts of FBI tapes of conversations where Ruggiero talked of million-dollar gambling operations that Ruggiero, on tape, says he was getting 15% of. Agent Bill Noon testified that 7 confidential informants told FBI agents that if Ruggiero were released on bail, he said he would flee. Ruggiero's attorney, Jeff Hoffman, denounced the testimony and said he wanted to check the audio tapes against the transcripts over the weekend. He asked that Ruggiero be released until a final decision on his client's bail is made. The judge denied that request and ordered Ruggiero back to jail. Then Hoffman asked that Ruggiero be given 5 minutes to see his son. Marshals told the judge they didn't have time for that. Angry, Ruggiero yelled to prosecutors, "Go home and tell your family about your big victory." Glaring at prosecutor LaRusso, he was led from the courtroom. Ruggiero shouted, "I wish it on your wife and kids like you wish it on my wife and kids." Then he stopped at the door, pointed his finger in the direction of LaRusso, and shouted, "You first." LaRusso told the judge he objected to being threatened.
I think Mr. LaRusso was trying to make the best record he can for the government, and so he interpreted it that way. But I think it was clear that Mr. Ruggiero was upset and aggravated that they wouldn't give him 5 minutes to see his family, and that's what he was talking about.
The hearing will continue on Monday. Mr. Hoffman is not optimistic about its outcome. He thinks the judge will decide to revoke his client's bail. That would keep Ruggiero in jail and send Mr. Hoffman to the Court of Appeals. In Brooklyn, I'm Frank Grimes, Channel 5 News.
A gangland killing in Brooklyn today. The victim, Wilfred Willie Boy Johnson, who police call a close associate of alleged mob boss John Gotti. Johnson was shot once in the head, or shot several times in the head outside his home. Police weren't surprised at the execution. Johnson had turned government informer to escape prosecution in a bribery case.
And even if there are more legal troubles ahead for John Gotti, he was not showing it tonight. He's out on the town somewhere. Dave Browdy is at the Gotti's home in Howard Beach. Dave?
All this evening, friends and family members came to John Gotti's home in Howard Beach. They stopped in, paid their respects. They left. Most of them didn't have a lot to say. John Gotti, you would think, would be spending the evening with his grandchildren and his children, and indeed they were with him, as was his father. But he didn't stay at home. Even though aides said he would be there, that was not the way things developed. The Dapper Don left home tonight, as he has all day, refusing to talk to reporters other than to say he feels good. He hopped into a waiting Audi sedan with Pennsylvania plates and sped off, followed shortly by his wife and other bodyguards. Destination unknown. The departure somewhat surprising, considering that just minutes before, Gotti had sent an aide out to say he wasn't going to talk to anyone, but he wasn't going out tonight at all.
He says, thank you very much. He says, he's with his grandchildren right now. He says, yo, give him a little break. He says, talk to you maybe tomorrow or next day.
One member of the Gotti family did speak to reporters, John Gotti Sr., the alleged mob boss's father, who said the verdict was a surprise.
I thank God that it happened that way. That's all I was praying for that. That's all.
Is the whole family?
So John Gotti is out on the town tonight with his family, or at least some of the members. You might expect that they'd be celebrating. There was a catering truck here earlier that brought some food in, but they sped off, and we don't know exactly where they are. But wherever it is, you can bet that for them at least, this has come out exactly the way they wanted. I'm Dave Browdy, Channel 5 News, reporting live from the Gotti home in Howard Beach, Queens.
Yes, it's the time that many communities hold fireworks shows, but maybe the most unusual is the one every year in Ozone Park, Queens, put on by one resident for his neighbors. That resident is a man some folks call the Godfather, John Gotti. Bob O'Brien is standing by. Bob.
Cora Ann, every year for the past 19 years, the people who live near this stretch of 101st Avenue in Ozone Park, Queens, are treated to an annual 4th of July block party and fireworks. Now, the people on the street insist that everyone in the neighborhood chips in for this great event, but the foremost hosts are members of the Bergen Hunt and Fish Club over there, and the premier member of the Bergen Hunt and Fish Club, of course, is John Gotti. Gotti and some of his family members are inside the clubhouse right now enjoying the holiday on the inside, and if Gotti does emerge, it's a good bet that he will do it around nightfall when the local pyrotechnics expert Trevor, a local plumber, does his thing. How many fireworks are you going to set off here tonight?
We have about 300 mortars and about 100 and something cases of firecrackers.
And how long is this going to go on?
It's going to go from 9 o'clock till 12.
Till midnight?
Till midnight.
A 3-hour fireworks?
Non-stop. Non-stop.
And who picks up the tab?
The neighborhood. The whole neighborhood chips in.
Not the Gottis?
The whole neighborhood chips in. It's a neighborhood deal.
Okay, great. Thank you, Trevor. As dusk approaches now, this part of 101st Avenue will be blocked off completely to traffic, and the people will come and the real party will start. We'll have more for you on tonight's 10 o'clock news. Reporting live from Ozone Park, Queens, Bob O'Brien, Fox News, Channel 5.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Ari Povich. The Dapper Don is free on bail after a night behind bars. John Gotti, reputed head of one of the nation's most powerful organized crime families, was whisked off the streets of Little Italy yesterday and arraigned today on charges he put out a contract on a union man who unwittingly messed with the mafia. Fox reporter Pablo Guzman reports.
After spending a night at Rikers Island, John Gotti appeared for his arraignment on assault and conspiracy charges, along with alleged Gambino soldier Tony Lee Guerreri. Not present was Gotti's boyhood friend and alleged Gambino capo, Angelo Ruggiero, who was arrested yesterday while undergoing cancer treatment at Beekman Downtown Hospital. The three were accused of shooting, but not killing, John O'Connor, an alleged corrupt Carpenters Union official.
The alleged shooting incident occurred in May of 1986, yet you're just returning an indictment now. Why is that?
Because this was a difficult investigation. It's always difficult to get to the top in any case, and this was no different.
Police say O'Connor sent goons here in February of 1986 after the owners refused to give in to a payoff demand. They did $30,000 worth of damage, knocking down walls, punching holes in the ceiling. Police also say that an owner of this place is a Gambino crime family associate, not the kind of place you come to make a threat, as O'Connor found out 3 months later.
For his efforts, O'Connor was shot in May 1986 4 times in the buttocks and hip as he entered 1650 Broadway, where the Carpenters Union has offices. After his arraignment, Gotti was released on $100,000 bail.
And so the Manhattan DA will try to do what the Brooklyn feds could not, put John Gotti away. Their case, however, relies primarily on wiretap surveillance and some rather shady witnesses. But if convicted, Gotti faces a minimum of 5 to a maximum of 15 years. From outside the Manhattan Criminal Court, I'm Pablo Guzman, Fox News, Channel 5.
The usual assortment of alleged wise guys, wise guy associates, and wannabe wise guys made their standard appearance at yet another John Gotti pretrial hearing. Basically, the chief reason why Gotti and company were in court this time was to get a date for the start of the trial. But things below the surface are never quite what they otherwise seem to be at a Gotti proceeding. For instance, by way of introducing himself into this bit of legal theater, there was the posturing of the attorney Gotti has chosen to replace Bruce Cutler, one Albert Kriegel.
Mr. Gotti controls his own situation. He is a man of intelligence, sensibility, and sensitivity.
Then there was the counterpunch to the government's charge that Gotti was picked up on a secret tape ordering the murder of attorney James LaRosa, who made a point of showing up in court and exchanging a familiar greeting with Mr. Gotti.
This was nothing but a joke. This was a group standing around talking about bringing me into the case or not and kidding around about what they would do or say if I said no. Everybody laughed. It's funny if you listen to it. It means nothing. For them to try and use it in this fashion is ridiculous.
John Gotti's alleged activities supposedly revolve around the Gambino organized crime family. But there's another crime family that's gotten the attention of both law enforcement and the mafia of late, the Lucchese crime family. Their acting boss, said to be Little Al Darko, apparently didn't show up at his apartment here in Little Italy, and a lot of people would like to know why.
Little Al, you see, was made acting boss of the Lucchese's, while boss Vic Amuso and underboss Anthony Gaspipe Casso went on the lam rather than go on trial in the so-called Windows case. That's the mob trial which features 400-pound capo-turned-witness Peter Chiodo, who survived 12 gunshots in a botched hit. Word on the street is that Vic and Gaspipe wanted Little Al to take care of 400-pound Pete, and when he blew it, Little Al decided to become the highest-ranking Fed stool pigeon yet. As for alleged Gambino boss John Gotti, jury selection in his trial is set to begin January 20th. Pablo Guzman, Fox News, New York. His Howard Beach home towards the waiting arms of his daughter. Daddy was home, and two Queens neighborhoods, inspired by the wise guys among them, rejoiced, because it seemed Gotti and the boys had beat the system, the first in a series of court victories against the government that added to Gotti's larger-than-life reputation. But according to Jerry Capisi in today's Daily News, John Gotti and his co-defendants were not exactly underdog Davids going up against the government's Goliath.
It seems that the Gambino crime family got to the jury, and the government allegedly has evidence to show that it happened again during the last Gotti trial. Now, Fox News has reported exclusively on some of the secrets used by the Gotti bunch to allegedly get to the jury in this rare interview with the agent who, at the time, headed the FBI's investigation into the Gambinos.
Their favorite way appears to be they will bring in members of their criminal family, different members throughout the trial, to sit in the courtroom and observe, very intently observe the jurors and see who speaks to them, who talks to them, to try to identify friends, neighbors, associates, acquaintances, and see if they know, the criminal members, recognize any of these friends.
Potential jurors in the next Gotti case fill out their questionnaires in 11 days. If past form is any indication, in spite of elaborate security measures, FBI agents privately believe the mob will try to stack the deck and get to the jury one more time. Pablo Guzman, Fox News, New York.
There was no shortage of men with big guns outside the federal jail in Lower Manhattan early Tuesday morning. A convoy of vans driven by heavily armed federal marshals had John Gotti and co-defendant Frank Locascio securely inside the vans before they moved out towards Brooklyn Federal Court. If convicted, Gotti and Locascio may face life in prison. In addition to other racketeering charges, Locascio is accused in 1 murder, while Gotti is accused of 5 murders, including the 1985 assassination of mob boss Paul Castellano and his underboss. Gotti allegedly ordered the hit so he could take over the Gambino crime family. The man Gotti picked as his underboss, Salvatore Sammy the Bull Gravano, was indicted with Gotti, but is now a government witness, expected to become the highest-ranking mob canary ever. Locascio's lawyer of choice, George Santangelo, was disqualified by Judge Leo Glasser, who found Santangelo was chosen and paid by Gotti and answers to Gotti. Santangelo denies it.
According to the government, Sam Gravano will testify that early in the game, Mr. Gotti indicated that he wanted me for one of the defendants. That's Mr. Gravano's testimony. I doubt if that's true.
The judge refused to let attorney David Greenfield quit as Locascio's attorney, even though Locascio said they argued constantly and he did not want a lawyer forced upon him.
Pointing to the flag behind the judge, Locascio said, "That's the American flag there, not the swastika." On Friday, lawyers for Gotti and Locascio will try to obtain the names of jurors from Gotti's 1987 federal trial. Prosecutors allege that Gotti was acquitted in that case because his people tampered with the jury. Since the government had access to those jurors' names to make its jury tampering case, lawyers for Gotti want those same jurors' names so they can defend Gotti against charges that he fixed the 1987 verdict. Outside Brooklyn Federal Court, Bob O'Brien, Fox News, New York.
On day 10 of the Gotti trial, the government continued to build upon the background of the central issue of its case, the murder of Paul Castellano. Tapes were played from bugs planted in 1985 at the homes of Agnello Della Croce, Castellano's underboss and a mentor to John Gotti, and Angelo Ruggiero, Gotti's closest friend and reportedly a top member of his crew. On June 9, 1985, John Gotti and Agnello or Neil Della Croce are at Angelo Ruggiero's house in Cedarhurst. Paul Castellano, the then Gambino boss, is getting fed up with Ruggiero and other Gotti crew members, and Neil, backed by Gotti, seems to be lecturing Ruggiero on the cold facts of mafia life. Keep in mind that what's played in court is of far better quality than what you are hearing.
Cosa nostra means that the boss is your boss. Understand?
I got to know, told my boss will tell me to turn against you. I won't do that.
Forget.
I won't do that.
What I'm trying to say is a boss is a boss. What the is a boss? We might as well make anybody else a switch.
Ruggiero has been caught talking out of school about the commission, the mafia's governing body, and Gotti reminds him that's a no-no.
I don't justify that, though. You're not supposed to speak every guy. You're not about a commission. All right, you're the only guy that's done it, but you ain't supposed to do it.
Finally, Della Croce chillingly warns Ruggiero of what the consequences are if his group goes up against a boss.
We don't go up and go to war. If that's what you want, I don't want that. Let's take it easy. That's the last stage. If I have to come to that, we'll come to that.
6 months after this conversation, Agnello Della Croce died of natural causes. 2 weeks later, Paul Castellano and the guy he would have named to replace Della Croce, Tommy Bellotti, were killed. Coming up next, civilian witnesses, innocent bystanders who were on the scene when Paul Castellano was gunned down. From outside the Brooklyn Federal Courthouse, I'm Pablo Guzman, Fox News, New York. He said more in 6 minutes than anybody outside his family has heard him say in the last 6 years. Anyone, that is, who wasn't listening in with a bug. This time, though, bugs were not necessary because, after a nervous start, John Gotti spoke up loudly before Judge Leo Glasser. It was a display of the courtroom game, in your face, Judge, that any common criminal familiar with the court system would have admired. You see, Judge Glasser had told Gotti to be at court today with his new attorneys because the judge had disqualified Bruce Cutler from representing Gotti at trial. But Gotti showed up without any attorneys. The judge said he could have been there with Bruce Cutler because, after all, this was a pre-trial hearing. But Gotti said he was confused. In fact, as Gotti picked up steam, he went on to say quite a lot, demanding of Judge Glasser, "Why can't I have my counsel, Bruce Cutler? He has been my counsel for 7 years. I've been his only defendant for 7 years. I'm not worried about their phony tapes or their phony transcripts this guy made up." By this guy, Gotti meant Assistant U.S. Attorney John Gleason, whom he later referred to as that bum.
John Gotti called the prosecutors bums today in court.
What do you think about that? What does that all mean? What do you think?
Well, I think he spoke his mind. I think that Prosecutor Gleason has a personal animus.
Bruce Cutler and his co-counsel Gerald Shargell may have problems of their own. As we reported last Thursday, some of the reasons why Judge Glasser disqualified them from the Gotti case may be used to build a case against them for obstruction of justice and tax evasion. And now Jerry Capisi confirms in the Daily News that a recently unsealed letter from Assistant U.S. Attorney Gleason to Judge Glasser mentions a grand jury investigation of the Gotti attorneys. Quote, "As our review of the tapes and the grand jury's investigation into other crimes continues, these conflicts can only mount."
You beat up the government, you take them to task, you embarrass them, you humiliate them, you expose them for what they are, and then they investigate you. That's crazy. It's McCarthyism all over again.
There's a lot of petty machismo going on here. As they were leaving the courtroom, for instance, Pete Gotti threw Prosecutor Gleason a body block and then said, "Oh, excuse me," as well as a lot of gamesmanship.
both on the part of the government and the defense. But if this particular chess match ends with a victory for the government, well then, as we told you last week, expect that attorneys Bruce Cutler and Gerald Shargell will be indicted. From outside the Brooklyn Federal Courthouse, I'm Pablo Guzman, Fox News, New York.
But these days, the admitted multiple murderer is a canary for the FBI. Leonetti is expected to be the star government witness at the next John Gotti trial. During his last trial, Gotti was asked why he refused to put on the earphones in court and listen to audio tapes being played into evidence against him.
I like Julio Iglesias.
Philip Leonetti says Julio Iglesias is not only associated with John Gotti, but also the man Gotti allegedly had killed, former mob boss Paul Castellano. A spokeswoman for Iglesias calls Leonetti's claim preposterous. Leonetti tells the FBI that when Robert De Niro was getting ready to play a Meyer Lansky-like mobster in the movie Once Upon a Time in America, he asked to have Philly crime lord Nicodemo Scarfo set up a meeting with Lansky. Scarfo reportedly refused. Frank Sinatra has played a gangster on the silver screen, but when Sinatra used to perform at the Westchester Premier Theater, Leonetti says Old Blue Eyes was controlled by mobsters. A famous 1976 snapshot taken backstage there shows Sinatra with the likes of Castellano and Carlo Gambino. Sinatra was asked about that photo when testifying before a Las Vegas casino commission.
As of today, you do not know what some of the background...
I didn't even know their names, let alone their backgrounds. I didn't even know most of the names.
Mob snitch Leonetti claims James Caan, who played Sonny Corleone in The Godfather, has real-life ties to New Jersey and New York wise guys. When Carmine the Snake Persico was on trial in Manhattan federal court in 1985, Caan showed up in court. Former U.S. Attorney Rudolph Giuliani won't forget that day.
In walks James Caan, goes up to, I think it was Andy Russo, and then to Persico and gives Persico a kiss. And I leaned over, not realizing there was a reporter with an earshot, and I said, I thought they killed him at the toll booth.
According to Rudy Giuliani, in the bad old days, mobsters used to be able to control which actors got starring roles in big films, and the mob even provided money for many movies. But, says Giuliani, thank goodness, the days of that kind of mob influence in show business seem to have passed. Bob O'Brien, Fox News, New York.
It is unclear if a leadership struggle is underway within the ranks of the New York mob in the wake of John Gotti's conviction. But experts believe that John Gotti is still firmly in control of his business empire.
So long as the public myth is out there that John Gotti will be back out on the street, his organized crime people on the street will not move in and take over his businesses, because they're afraid he might be out in a year, year and a half, 2 years. Then he'll have them all killed.
And this is big business. Let's start with construction. Without mafia approval, Trump Tower, the Javits Center, and many other building complexes might still be empty lots. It's been said that organized crime levies a 15 to 25% tax on the city's construction industry to ensure that skyscrapers soar up from the swamps of municipal red tape. In the garment industry, it's believed that every cut of silk, every button and zipper that goes into New York department stores passes through the hands of the Gambinos. Without this so-called mob tax, consumers might see the prices of store items drop by up to 7%. In addition, it's alleged that the mob greases the wheels of the Fulton fish market, controls most of the private trash removal industry, runs hardcore pornography, drug trafficking, illegal gambling, and portions of the film industry. Finally, it's important to know that every illegal mafia operation has a price, and today it's the consumers who are picking up the tab.
I would say the cost per New Yorker is considerably more than anything you could quantify at $2,000. What you can't quantify is the business that's lost, the business that's driven away, the people who don't do business here or cease to do business here, because who wants as your partner some goon that comes in every month and takes money from you?